Hello, my name is Nan Roberts, and I'm the president of Scrabble School Preservation Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us in reference to our Black History Month presentation 2024. This year, we focused on Black businesses in Rappahannock County. Last year, we had actually a part one, and the part one mainly talked about businesses between 1950s and 1970s. We found out in some of our research and in digging a little bit that there were businesses prior to that time. And as part of our presentation today, we have some guests, and many of them are local that you know well. Donald Porter from the Washington, Virginia area. He's going to be talking about a business that his uncle founded many years ago. Also, Terry Miller. Many of you know Terry from the Carver Center. She's going to be talking about a business in Washington, Virginia. And also, Jimmy Jackson. Many of you know Jimmy. He's our guest speaker today, and he's going to be talking about his entrepreneurial and business journey from Rappahannock to today. I'll be discussing two small segments in reference to the Jordan family in Amosville, Virginia, and also Mr. Willie Jackson's family in Sperryville, Virginia. With that, we'll go ahead and begin. And we start with Mountain View Gas Station Grocery from the Jordan family in Amosville, Virginia. I was able to speak with Faye Jordan Nicholas. Many of you remember her. She was an educator in Rappahannock County, and also she was one of the recipients of our Dreamkeeper Award 2024 for this year. She was born in 1928, and she is still thriving at her home occasionally in Ettrick, Virginia, and also spending much of her time with one of her daughters in Charlottesville, Virginia. Faye Jordan Nicholas was married to Dr. Freddie Nicholas. Many of you remember his name as well. And he was an educator, and they met at Virginia State College back in the day. So these are some reflections that I had an opportunity to talk with Ms. Nicholas, and so we're going to look at those fond memories of hers right now. This is a lovely picture of her parents who own the store there in Amosville, just off of Route 211. Edward and Elmo Jordan. Lovely picture. I don't know the date when this was taken, but a wonderful couple, great memories all around about them. This is a photo of the home place as it appears today. And there's a sign there that memorializes the site and the store. Now, this was a dual purpose. It served as a store and also served as their home. You can't see this particular building from Route 211. You have to actually go down into what's called Jordan Lane there, right off of Route 211 as you get coming into the Amosville area. The store was in operation the 1930s to 1962. As I mentioned, Ms. Nicholas talked about some of her fond memories of the store. She was just a youngster. As we mentioned, she was born in 1928. The store was in operation as early as 1933. She remembers that they had a candy bar. It was a long glass case, and she said she would go there and gaze at all the candy that was there. They had blocks of cheese, and they came in large round containers. Now we're going to see a photo of one of these containers, one like it, not one that was in the store, but one much like it. I was in an antique shop recently, and I actually came across one. She says that her mother was able to cut the cheese and weighed it for sale. And there was an ice chest with 4 legs that she remembers. The family actually lived in the back of the store. As I mentioned, it was a dual purpose. There was an interior window for serving the customers. She said that her mother was able to see the customers that were coming in to be served. Her father was known as Uncle Dukes. He was born in Flint Hill, Virginia, and her mother was known as Miss Elmo, born in Huntley. Interestingly enough, like my parents, Howard and Dorothy Butler, some of you remember them, they were both born in Rappahannock County, but they didn't meet until they actually went to high school at the Manassas Industrial School. So this is somewhat of the same kind of story. She thinks that her parents met in Washington, D.C. Her father was in the military, and her mother and her aunt were working for a general there in Washington. So she thinks that there was some connection at that point. She says that her father was very industrious. He had other businesses. He was in the hauling business at one point. Interestingly, my father was in the hauling business one time as well. Her father was hauling apples between Winchester, Virginia. We know Winchester as the apple capital, and also Flint Hill. And he worked at the American Viscose. Her immediate family, there was a number of children, including Faye. Her father built what they referred to as the little house on the property for her three brothers. Faye still owns the property, some of the property there in Amosville, and her parents are buried in Rappahannock. So the other person I'm going to be talking about today is Mr. James Ingram. Mr. Ingram in Sperryville, Virginia, my hometown, and he was quite the entrepreneur. He was an innkeeper, a watch repair person. He's a barber, a photographer, and quite a landowner. Here's an early photo of Mr. James Arthur Ingram, born in 1858 in Rappahannock County. He is actually a direct descendant of a slave in Rappahannock. Many of you know or may recognize this house. This is where the before and after is now located on Main Street in Sperryville. So Mr. Ingram's home was at this same location. And also, as we mentioned, he was an innkeeper, and he used this as a way to, of course, his family helped him, his children helped him with this location in Sperryville. This is a very early photo. It's a little fuzzy. I'm not sure that you can see it that well, but this is a photo of Mr. Ingram and his wife, Florence, and their family in front of the home in Main Street on Sperryville. Do not have an exact date on this, but it would be the late 1880s, perhaps, into early 1900s. On the left, you see a picture of Mr. Russell. He's a grandson, and also his first cousin, Mr. Willie Lee Jackson, or William L. Jackson, was our Dreamkeeper Award, one of our awardees for 2024. He is still living and thriving in the Silver Spring area. And we just thank him for providing the information about his grandfather, Mr. James Ingram.
Good afternoon. My name is Donald Porter. I'm here to present to you the life of my uncle, Mr. Robert Bob Beckwith, better known as Bob, and to me, Uncle Bob. He was born on February 17th, 1917, and passed away on July the 7th, 1993. He was born to Henry Brown Beckwith and Bessie Lawson Beckwith. He lost his mother at an early age, and he was raised by he and his sister was raised by his father's mother, Alice Beckwith Porter. He was raised in Gid Brown Holler in Washington, Virginia. He attended Gid Brown Elementary School, which is now known as Gid Brown Baptist Church. At an early age, Bob became infatuated with cars. He made his toys, he cut them out of tin cans to make toy cars. He built his first car when he was 16 years old. My grandfather told me that after Uncle Bob had built his first car, he took him to the sheriff's office to find out about getting a driver's permit. The sheriff told my grandfather and Uncle Bob that if the boy was smart enough to build a car, he was smart enough to drive it. Uncle Bob served in World War II as a master mechanic. After service, he came back to Culpeper, Virginia, and married his wife, Iola. They had 2 children, Ronald and Brenda. After working for other garages, Uncle Bob opened his own garage, which he never advertised, but his business grew. While fixing other people's cars, he found time to build cars for himself. The garage was a favorite meeting place to talk cars, politics, and worldly subjects. Uncle Bob was the only African-American competitor in the East Coast custom car circuit. He won many trophies and during the 1950s and 60s. He told me that, and later, that when he went different places to show his cars, that they had to empty the gas tanks and stuff like that. And then at night, when it was over with, he had to go out and find gasoline just to put in his vehicle to get home. So it didn't work out too great. So he gave it up after a while. The old folks, they knew him. It's certain vehicles that he wouldn't work on, but the ones he worked on, he was good at it. And people of his age back in the day, he was the mechanic in Culpeper. He was a very quiet person. He didn't go out a lot, venture out. Like we lived in Rappahannock, Washington, Virginia, and he lived in Culpeper. He would come up to visit. Me and my mother and siblings lived with my grandfather, and so he would come up to see his father every now and then, and he'd be driving. He always had his own made vehicle, mostly that little yellow and black pickup that he always drove. And when you went to Culpeper, you only saw him between his house and Safeway, which is pretty close. And he always had the same coveralls on, and he always had grease on his fingernails. that was his calling card.
Well, good morning. I am Terry Miller, and I have the pleasure of being the curator for the Carver Four County Museum, which is located in Culpeper. And it focuses on the history, and I mean all kinds of history, both military, cultural, social, and economic history of the African American families and the community that established itself and ensured that the George Washington Carver Regional High School was built in 1948 and that it worked its way right on through until closure at full integration 20 years later. Well, what I would really like to do is start with John Lovell Williams because his name seems to be forgotten a little bit in history of Rappahannock County simply because He was born quite early in anyone's memory. And it seems that when people pass away, especially in the 30s and 40s, that he or she are not as well remembered as they could be. So we're really happy to bring some information about this man. And I'll follow that with one of his in laws, whose name is Felbert Scott Green. So let's start with John Lovell Williams. Of course, he's born in Rappahannock, and he's born in 1878, and that's according to his death certificate. And he was the third of 11 known children. There were 9 boys and 2 girls who lived past infancy. And his parents were John Williams, and sometimes they listed his name as George. Now, the father's name is George on his marriage license, but every place else it is John. And he was born in 1834. And he married a woman named Tabitha Smith. And she was born in 1851, so almost 20 years younger than he. And the couple were married on November 11th, 1871. And so from researching him, I know that both of their roots go back quite far. So now, Mr. Williams, John Lovell, married on December 28th. So he took his bride at the end of the year in 1899. And he married what turned out to be this powerhouse of a woman named Lou Emma Sloan. And she was the daughter of Hamilton and Molly Sloan. And those two, as far as we know, had 7 children. So 4 girls and 3 boys. What's interesting about Mr. Williams, of course, because he lived in this rural environment, he was a farmer, okay? Living off the land, making sure that his children could eat and that he could eat as well. And so somewhere in this area, he became a plasterer. He learned the skills of a plasterer. And let me back up just a little bit and give you just a little did you know information. Well, his father, of course, owned his farm on which he raised those 11 children. And as early as 1910, John Lovell, his wife, and 5 of their children were already living on that same farmland. So, what we can guess is John Lovell's father passed away, and he was the one who stayed home. So, he was the one who was able to take care of the family legacy land. And although he did own this farm and work that farm, in 1910, that was what he listed on his records, that he was a farm laborer at that location. But by 1920, he reported his occupation as stonemason slash general work. So he learned a new skill, and he was able to use that skill to earn money for his family as well as be able to feed off the land on which he lived. And 10 years later, though, he's older. And by the 1930s, he's reporting that he again is just farming. He's farming. Now, that makes sense because 3 years after that record of 1930, he passed away. And he passed away actually on July 18th. He got sick on July the 12th. And what I like about this part of the record in his life, he built a lot of stone walls around Rappahannock. He's known for his home, wonderful stone work around his home and his property. And that's what he's known for when someone points that out. You can ride by these beautiful walls in Rappahannock and not know how they got there. But one of the things that people talk about in Rappahannock is the abundance of rocks, the abundance of rocks on the mountains. And so when people were trying to clear some land so that they could plant crops, they had to move all these rocks somewhere. So instead of discarding the rocks or whatnot, Mr. Williams was able to make permanent structures from them. So he is like a rock in, in Rappahannock. When he passed away, although he had been ill and he had been on his farm for a while, his oldest daughter is the one who gave the information to put on his death certificate. And the occupation was, my dad was a stonemason. He was a stonemason. And I can just feel the pride coming out of her as she just makes that statement. So that even that record, if people don't remember him, if they were doing any research at all and they looked at that record, you know that that man was a stonemason. So that's that's what I feel about John Lovell Williams, and that's kind of what I would like to share about him. We're going to talk about Felbert Scott Green, one of John Lovell's younger sisters' name was Anna, and Felbert Scott Green married Anna Williams. Felbert was born March 1881, and he was the firstborn of 9 known children. His parents were Bruce Green and Mildred Frances Williams Green, and they also had very deep roots in the area. Now, Anna Green is quite special, and I can see them as a couple being the power couple of the day. They were members of course, the Washington First Baptist Church there. And Anna Green was educated as he was. The first occupation that we see as early as 1904, he was teaching. And he was teaching in the Washington School there. And so Anna Williams comes almost 10 years later, and she is teaching there with him. And oh my, love flourishes, and they marry. Now, the couple does not have children. So I started looking just to kind of see what's going on. And so I looked up his World War I registration record. And on that record, he says that he is without a leg and he is now a barber. I have been searching newspaper articles, whatever I can find, to see if there's any record of an accident or whatever. But he left the classroom and decided, okay, still have to make a living. So he opened up in his home, in the back of his home, um, a barber shop. And that is where he began to cut hair and become the community barber. The other thing that's interesting about them is they lived in town. They were on Gay Street, and that's where all the action was because the church was not far from them. And they were both the founders and the leaders of the local league of parents and neighbors. So Anna Green and her husband, Pelbert, organized each church to be in the league so that they could advocate for better conditions and for better school conditions. And one of the wonderful things about their advocacy is number one, how big it was. The Rappahannock area had the largest number of league members of the 4 counties that we study. And if I didn't tell you those 4 counties, let me tell you now. So it's Culpeper, Orange, Madison, and Rappahannock. And people think that little old Rappahannock, all the way up there, back in these times, they couldn't have possibly done anything. Oh my goodness. But they were the most organized and the most active. And one of the proofs that we have of their effectiveness is Rappahannock County, of course, like all counties, received an allocation from the state in education to make sure that Black children as well as white children were educated. Rappahannock County always spent more per pupil on African American education than they received. And that is shocking for that area. And the only other in the 4 county region that did that was Orange. And so that's a testament to the kind of leadership that they had trying to work within the system. And they were effective in doing so. So Mr. Green was what I call a race man, meaning that he gave also of his money just to help things, like Mr. Williams did. They just helped. They were always looking for ways to make things better with the race. Mr. Green's wife died in 1949, and with him having no children, he still continued on in his barbershop work. And then one day, evidently, he's too ill to handle things by himself. So I do not know if this is a distant relative or a friend, but someone came to get him and move him in with their family in Arlington, Virginia. And that's where he lived the rest of his life. The reason why I'm so touched by him is number one, of course, he only had a leg. And he even said that in his World War II registration, where he details which leg it is, that he is without his left leg. He took the time to write a will. And in his will, he names I think there are just 3 of his brothers and sisters that are still living, and he leaves them something. And it's not a lot, it's like $10 and $15, but he leaves them a gift in his will. He had a piano in his house that he left to someone. And he says that, this family in Arlington took me in and treated me with love, and I appreciate them. So after all of my other people get whatever they want, then the rest of the estate goes to this family that had helped him.
My name is Jimmy Jackson. I was born March 29, 1950, in Slate Mills, Rappahannock County, Virginia. As a young boy growing up, I worked on the farm at an early age. I got some construction knowledge helping my grandfather in the summers. My grandfather was not a licensed contractor, but kind of a jack of all trades that did a lot of things here in Rappahannock County, building back at those times hen houses and pig pens and additions for people. And I learned how to do some carpentry just kind of following him around. I also worked on the farm, milking cattle, feeding cattle, making hay, picking corn. At a probably early teenage, kind of realized that that type of work was not going to get me where my dreams were. Uh, so at 17 years old, I left Rappahannock County on my own. I moved to Falls Church to live with my mother's brother, my uncle, Johnny Haney. At that point, I was supporting myself. When I moved to Falls Church, I did not drop out of school. I did quit attending Rappahannock High School, but I enrolled in George C. Marshall High School in Falls Church. At that point, I started working after school, working in a paint and hardware store as a part-timer. Within 2 months, 3 months of working in that particular store, they promoted me to night manager, gave me the responsibilities of cashing out in the evenings, and I moved up to where they wanted to purchase a store and have me run a second store. While they were in the process of doing that, I had a gentleman from a company called Ryland Homes. Ryland Homes was a new company, building starter homes, affordable homes. They had expanded from Maryland. They initially were rooted in Columbia, Maryland. They had opened a field office in Reston, Virginia, and they were looking to employ personnel to operate and manage their construction. One night while I was trying to close up the store, there was a Italian gentleman who came into the store and was kind of walking around, looking around. He didn't seem like the type of person that would be trying to rob the store or steal anything, but he did have me puzzled because he wasn't saying anything. And back those days, that was when clients would come into the hardware store and you would approach them, hello, can I help you find anything? Not like today where it's hard to find anything. But anyway, Mr. Salcetti, he asked me if I was happy working there, and I answered with a very enthusiastic yes, because, and I'm kind of backtracking here, but when I left the country, my dream was to be employed and make at least $10,000 a year. And the hardware store had already kind of exceeded that. So yes, I was a happy camper. But Mr. Salcetti basically said, we'd like to offer you a job. And during the conversation, he had asked how much I was making. And of course, I was trying to calculate in my head. And before I could say anything, he says, don't matter about that. Whatever it is, we'll double it. So needless to say, I went to work for Ryland Homes, and initially I was employed as a material coordinator. Material coordinator was all of the lumber and all of the different various materials that went into constructing a house had to go through across my desk to compare the particular model of house with those materials to make sure that there was no overages or waste. They had brought me on because There had been a number of over-ordering, theft, etc. So my job was to minimize the waste of material. I did that for about a year and a half, and at which point they moved me into being a customer service manager. They felt that I had a good relationship with clients and was able to step into the position of handling any service calls that took care of the warranty work for 1 year after the houses were constructed. In doing that, I had a number of awards given to me where I was considered the Service Manager of the Year. I excelled in that I earned trips, and that was the first time I got to actually travel out of the country. Was I won awards where they gave us all paid trips. And so my wife and I were able to travel to Portugal and different areas, the Caribbean, Spain. So a lot of interesting things that happened in my life there. Ryland then, after 3 years as a service manager, they asked me if I wanted to try managing job sites. So I became a construction project manager. This is when I really got into the full field of construction, not just the service of the houses, but everything from looking at the lot, clearing the trees, excavation, all of the utilities. At that point, there were only two Afro-American management persons with Ryland at that time, one in Columbia, Maryland, and I in Virginia. So it was challenging, but I took that as a plus, and I working harder and longer and trying to work smarter. I competed with a lot of seasoned white management. In 1978, I was actually offered a position to go to work for Corbett Homes, and Corbett had been a top sales manager for Ryland, and went and started his own firm, which was Corbett Custom Homes. James Corbett hired me to manage all of his construction as well as his development. That was a major step up and a tremendous salary. This was in 1978. I was employed then at $75,000 a year, which was just unbelievable. So from 1970 when I graduated of hoping to make $10,000 a year, I have now been fortunate enough and blessed enough, smart enough, however you want to put it, but working hard. So I felt very successful and blessed. Corbett, however, we started a number of projects. Corbett was an aggressive person who the sky was the limit. In 1981, Corbett went bankrupt, and they forced me to start my own company. During the process of Ryland and Corbett, I was wise enough that Ryland gave me an opportunity to build my first house. So at 22 years old, I was able to buy a brand new house from Ryland Homes. That home I purchased for $37,000. When Corbett hired me, I sold that house for $64,000, and I purchased a home on the lake in Reston, a Corbett home. They gave me the choice to pick whatever lot I wanted and build whatever size of house, well, one of their biggest model homes. So when he went bankrupt, needless to say, I was able to parlay that house. I sold it and opened my own company, Jackson Builders. Uh, so I started out building basements and decks, and I had grown to uh, be able to buy lots. I'd buy one lot and turn it into 2 or 3 lots, and then I would decide which houses I was going to build on it. And I continue to do that even to this day. So in 1999, I had advanced into doing some commercial construction as for other clients, as well as building my own houses and doing remodeling for clients. I was also building some daycare centers for some other clients. I've had an opportunity to renovate a daycare school that the client didn't have enough money and could not get a loan to renovate the school. I was fortunate enough to have the cash to offer to buy that school. So I bought that daycare school, and then I had now diversified construction and daycare ownership, and that was in 1999. I saved all the money from I made with that first daycare school. In 2004, I opened a second daycare school. And so the first school would house 88 children. The second school was 150. And in 2024, I opened my third daycare school. So I had a strong work ethic. Still do. I'm 74 years old and still working when people tell me you should retire and sit down. So I think that, that came from my parents, my grandparents, and just a lot of support from people that I met and encountered in life. Today, the construction business has become a situation where it's a lot of it's hands off. So you really need to have a creative mind in design. I did myself have to go and learn computer drafting because I learned to draw my own plans as well when I started my company, because it was so expensive to hire an architect. When I started my business, at one point I had 40 employees that worked directly for me. Now everything is subcontracted out. It's piecework, and truthfully, it's a better way to build because you're not carrying these large payrolls all the time if there is a slack period. So when I went into construction, blacks were typically hired only to be worker bees. You were hired to be the grunt guy. So working construction management, you always ran up against people that wanted to work against you. You always had to prove yourself by exceeding anything that your coworkers did. You also had to be able to take the abuse, laugh it off, and take the name calling. But even back then with Ryland, there were a number of subcontractors that Ryland hired to still carry out their construction for them. They pretty much employed only management. So I would manage to make my job sites more ready for the subcontractors than the white guys. I would go and work with those guys on Saturdays to not only learn what they were doing, but I would work with them free at no charge. I'd help them pack up their tools. I'd help them lay out the house. I would work with them to make sure that they saw all the options that the client had bought or the purchaser had bought, just to make their job easier. So when I and another one of the white supervisors would call them and say, hey, lot 22 is going to be ready for electrician on Friday, they would usually put me ahead because they knew my project was going to be swept out, it was going to be clean, it was going to be easy for them to get their job done. So I always wind up competing well with everybody because I would put in that extra work to build that relationship with the subcontractors. So, and I learned that, and still today that works. I don't see my subcontractors as worker bees, but I see them as partners with me, and I try to treat them with respect so that they will respect me likewise.